Hey, it's Chris, the Supply Chain Doctor. Over the years, I've interviewed some of the brightest minds and successful leaders in supply chain management. In May 2020, I sat down with supply chain leader Ken Ackerman to learn more about him and collect a little supply chain management history. After the interview, Ken told me about a similar interview he had with Dr. Jim Stock many years prior, and the related work Dr. Stock did. In November 2020, I was able to catch up with Dr. Stock to learn about him and his work. As an academic in the world of transportation, logistics, and what we now call supply chain management, Jim was well connected to many of the original academic thought leaders in the space. Jim did interviews with many of these thought leaders and shared them with me. The list includes Ken Ackerman, Don Bowersox, James Haskett, Bud Lalonde, John Langley Jr., Tom Mentzer, Tom Spee, and Daniel Wren. To carry on the great work started by Dr. Jim Stock, I'm dusting off these interviews and bringing them to you to help you get a better understanding of supply chain management and hopefully become a more effective supply chain professional.
Good afternoon. My name is James Stock, the Frank Harvey Endowed Professor of Marketing at the University of South Florida. We're here today to conduct an interview with one of the luminaries in the academic discipline of logistics and supply chain management. The purposes of this interview are several. First, and perhaps foremost, is to get to know the personal side of one of the leading logistics and supply chain academicians, a person who's had significant influence on their profession. We often read the person's books and journal articles, listen to their presentations at academic and professional meetings, sometimes even have individual discussions with them at various events and venues. However, we rarely get to know the person beyond the professional aspects of their careers. In the field of literature and art, for example, researchers often consider the what, who, why, how, and when of a particular book or painting, short story, poem, and so on. They speculate on what might have motivated the writer or the artist to write the book or to paint the painting, to determine the message or the story of the text or the art, and the writer's or the artist's perception of the contributions of their work. In that same way, through this and other interviews that will be conducted of leading business scholars, as the late Paul Harvey so often expressed, we'll attempt to get the rest of the story. These taped interviews will hopefully serve as supporting material for various university courses where the various works of these academicians may be discussed. They will be of significant impact in courses where history and theory are being examined, since these individuals contributed extensively to that history and theory. Each interview is based on a set of structured questions using an interview guide. Of course, the interviewees' responses are spontaneous. They may lead to other questions related to those responses. However, the general format for this and other interviews that will be conducted in the future will be similar. It is hoped that audiences who view these interviews will get a broader and richer view of the people and events that have shaped their disciplines. We hope that you will learn from what will be said and discussed during these interviews and be able to more fully appreciate and understand the significant contributions made by these luminaries in the field. Let's begin by introducing our distinguished guest. Dr. John T. Tom Mentzer is presently the Harry J. and Vivienne R. Bruce Excellence Chair of Business and a Chancellor's Professor in the Department of Marketing and Logistics, University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee. He graduated from the General Motors Institute with a Bachelor of Industrial Administration in 1974. He obtained an MBA from Michigan State University in 1975. His PhD was completed in 1978 from Michigan State University, where he concentrated in marketing, logistics, and psychometrics. His dissertation was entitled Simulated Product Sales Forecasting, Analysis of Market Demand Alternatives. Upon graduation, Tom took a position as assistant professor at Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State University, or VPI. He remained there until 1994, whereupon he assumed a position at the University of Tennessee, where he has remained for the rest of his academic career. He was promoted to associate professor in 1981, full professor in 1986, and the Virginia Real Estate Professor of Marketing in 1990 at VPI. When he moved to the University of Tennessee, he was appointed to his present position. Altogether, Tom has served as a faculty member for more than 30 years, teaching and conducting research in marketing, logistics, and supply chain management. During his career, Tom has received numerous awards for his distinguished service to his students, his university, and the profession. He became a Distinguished Fellow of the Academy of Marketing Science in 1992, received the Outstanding Teacher of the College Award in 2000, was given the Academy of Marketing Science Outstanding Marketing Teacher Award in 2001. He was awarded the Council of Supply Chain Management Distinguished Service Award in 2004. And he was named a DC Velocity Magazine Rainmaker in 2005. And he received the Armitage Medal from the SOL, the International Society of Logistics, in 2007, as well as many other awards and honors during his career. The Distinguished Service Award, given by the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals, is their highest honor. It's given annually to an individual who has made significant career-long contributions to the supply chain management and logistics professions. This recognition by his peers provides ample evidence of the high regard that the profession holds Tom Mentzer and his accomplishments. For many years, Tom served on the executive committee of CSCMP in various positions. There's probably not a member of that organization who has not received some, and probably many, innovative and business-changing ideas from the various committees and positions held by Tom. Of course, Tom has been one of the most productive logistics and supply chain management faculty in terms of publications, executive development programs, conference participation, and university education activities. He has authored or co-authored 9 books. He's published 119 refereed articles in such prestigious journals as the Harvard Business Review, Business Horizons, Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, Journal of Business Logistics, Journal of Operations Management, Journal of Marketing, and Journal of Retailing. He's the most published author in the Journal of Business Logistics. He served as a member of the editorial boards of numerous journals, including the Journal of Marketing, the International Journal of Physical Distribution and Logistics Management, the Journal of Business Logistics, and the Journal of the Academy of Marketing and Science, and others. Tom also has excelled in the traditional areas of academic faculty participation. He's served in a variety of roles within his department, college, and university. Yet it's what Tom has done beyond the norm that sets him apart from his peers. His accomplishments with CSCMP over a long and productive career are truly outstanding and profession impacting. The sheer volume of articles and books he has published have had significant influence on faculty and students in the fields of marketing, logistics, and supply chain management. From a student perspective, Tom has won college teaching awards, has assisted scores of students find careers in logistics and supply chain management fields. He has chaired more than 20 PhD dissertations and served as committee member of even more. In recognition of his professional standing, Tom has served as a consultant and advisor to companies around the globe, including firms such as OfficeMax, Whirlpool, Best Buy, and Ditch Witch International, and many others. In sum, his articles, books, and teaching materials have impacted thousands of students and business executives around the world. Tom has been a valuating contributor in every aspect of his professional career. It is our distinct pleasure to get to know the personal side of this man so that we can more fully appreciate his significant professional contributions and achievements. So Tom, good to speak with you, and glad you could have us here to interview you.
Yeah.
So we're going to ask you some questions you probably haven't been asked, probably in quite some time, but your answers can be spontaneous, and if you prefer not to answer a question, just let me know and we'll move on.
Okay.
So the first one usually is the easiest. When and where were you born?
I was born in Charlestown, West Virginia. My family lived in Harper's Ferry, about 7 miles away, and the hospital was in Charlestown. So if you look at the easternmost point in West Virginia, I literally grew up on that point.
And what year was that you were born?
1951.
1951. Now, as you think back to your childhood, was there anything in your childhood that you think shaped your present personality and disposition that you have now?
Yeah, I think it was growing up in Harper's Ferry. I grew up in a little sleepy town. It was, given the transportation of the time, it was too far from D.C. to be a bedroom community. So, people who lived there were just basically families that owned farms maybe and lived in town, or worked for the local some of the local small manufacturers. I grew up in a house that literally sat on a cliff, and down over the cliff, if you went down 300 feet, it wasn't a straight drop like in the Rockies. It's in the Appalachians, which I think is more interesting because you'd have a little trails and caves and so forth. You came out at the Potomac River. And my mother said every time she was looking for me, she'd look out the kitchen window, and the dog and I'd be coming up over the cliff. So I think in the Shenandoah, Harper's Ferry is where the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers come together. People since I was a kid have been coming there as a tourist attraction just to see the colors and. And just a view. It's a beautiful, beautiful view. So I think a large part of how I was shaped was I had kind of a Huck Finn growing up. Building rafts on the Potomac River and fishing there in the summer. We owned the family farm across the river in Maryland. So I've always considered myself. I was born in West Virginia and technically grew up there. I think of myself as a Marylander. Family's been there since the 1700s. So I think that was a large part of it. It was the farm boy growing up, and a lot of with animals around and lots of friends. You could wander anywhere in town. There was never any traffic. My dog's favorite place to sleep was in the middle of the street. And when cars would come down the street, they'd blow the horn and he'd leisurely get up and get out of their way. So I think that had a large impact on kind of who I am, was the terrain I grew up in. Okay.
Out of curiosity, did you ever try to throw a silver dollar across the Potomac?
Yeah. Actually, we talked about that a lot as a kid. We always figured the father of our country did some great things, but he was a lover of tall tales. Because where I grew up, the Potomac River was a good 3 miles wide. Now, he must have had a heck of an arm on him to be able to wing it that far. Now, my father owned coal companies, so I've been up into West Virginia, and I've actually been to where the Potomac River starts as a spring coming out of the ground. So I've got George beat by one. I've actually stood on both sides of the Potomac at the same time.
Oh, interesting. How do you think your parents would describe you as a child, and why?
I think my mother would describe me as a trial. I was a rambunctious kid. I was raised in the traditions of the 50s. So I was raised to listen to obey your parents, and for the most part did. Wasn't never was in trouble. Technically in trouble in town, but my mother was a very strict lady, and I think she'd say my sister was a much easier child to raise because she was much more likely to follow all the rules. I was a little more likely to shave the rules. I think my father saw me as a mystery. My father was he shaped a lot of who I am today. And not intentionally, but just as an exemplar, as a life example. My father walked up to me at my college graduation, shook hands with me, and said, I didn't think you'd live this long. And I thought that's a really great kind of summary statement of, this is a kid that kind of pushed the edge a little bit. So, my dad died when I was 28, so I was always happy that I got to live long enough that that he and I grew up enough that he and I could be friends. And I think he was very proud of the guy I turned into. But I think he had his doubts along the way.
Are there any specific memories from your childhood that you've never forgotten?
Yeah, I've got two, and I call them my studies in black and white. And my earliest memory, and I think it probably is as a toddler, was the Potomac River would at night in the morning as it cooled off would fill up with fog. And you'd literally walk out of in our backyard, and it looked like you could walk straight across this landscape of fog to the Maryland mountains 3 miles away on the other side. And I remember coming out in the sun. Our house faced the backyard faced to the north, and I remember kind of toddling around the house and seeing my mother. And it's early morning. It was barely sun up, and this golden light's coming through this fog. And my mother's and she may have not been. It's a memory, But in my memory, she's out there in a white house dress, hanging up sheets. And I just have this memory of Harper's Ferry being this clean, kind of safe place to grow up. That's the study. That's the study in white. The study in black is one of the ironies. There's a lot of history around Harper's Ferry. It was people around there actually think it's where the Civil War actually began in 1859. With John Brown's raid, and everything after that was preparation up to Fort Sumter. A minority opinion, of course, but one of the ironies there's a lot of history the local people know about. There are stone steps in Harper's Ferry called the Bloody Steps because the Episcopal hospital was, or the Episcopal church was a hospital. And literally so many men bled to death in that hospital that the blood would run down those steps like a stream. And the story that's told to tourists is you see the old Episcopal church, and it's this old kind of gutted fieldstone artifact. And the story is that that it burned in 1904, and that, rather than rebuild it, they just built a new church up on up further up on the hill in town. The real story is the Episcopal ministers felt they never could get the smell of dried blood out of the church.
Interesting.
So many people, it was in the walls, and when the church burned down, they said that's the first time that stench wasn't still there. So after 40 years, they built another place. So you kind of got those histories, and one of the great ones is John Brown came to Harper's Ferry to free the slaves. And he was an extreme abolitionist. He believed that the only way the slaves were ever going to be freed was by force. So he came to U.S. The Harper's Ferry at the time was a booming industrial area, and it was one of the two U.S. arsenals. The other was in Connecticut. And his plan was to come there, take the arsenal. Thought the local slave population would immediately back him and rise up with him. So he came there to free slaves, and the first man killed by his raiders was a free black man. Mm-hmm. And this free black man had a daughter who was born the week he was killed, and she became kind of the historical arbiter of the town. She lived to be over 100. when I was probably 6 or 7 years old. So at that time, she'd have been in her late 90s. My mother took me to see this woman, and said she's we called her Mrs. Washington. She'd married, I guess, Mr. Washington somewhere along the way. My memory in black is my mother taking me to see this woman at a little shanty in Harper's Ferry, and going in, and even though it was a bright sunny day, it was dark and inside, and sitting in this dark corner is this old gnarled up black woman. And my mother said, it's time you learn the history of your town. And I went over Mrs. Washington. I crawled up on her knee, and she said, "Now, you're Tom Mentzer's boy, right?" I'm Tom Jr. And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Well, let me tell you the history of your town." And the memory as I spent all afternoon with her, the reality is probably this happened over a dozen visits, but I have this memory of her telling me all the little secrets that, she was the oral historian, and she saw her job is to pass on all the little secrets of the way Harper's Ferry had really operated for the last 100 years. So those are my two, I think, the memories that always immediately come to mind.
And it would have been fascinating to have a video of her.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Which is one of the reasons we're doing these.
How technology changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump a little bit ahead to your school
I'll
years.
be Mrs. Washington of logistics.
When you think about your school years, tell us types of schools you went to from elementary school up through high school.
Okay. My parents might have a different memory of this, but I don't think I was a very good student up until about the 8th grade. And we have these people who kind of influence your life, and excuse me. You have these people that kind of influence your life along the way. And in 8th grade civics, we had been integrated as a school system since I was in the 5th grade. So we were kind of used to, black and white students being together, and I really think integration was easier in many cases in small towns. It was easier for the students than it was for the parents, because we were too young to know any different. This was just another kid. Interestingly enough, high school, in 9th grade through, I think I said 8th, I meant 9th grade. 9th grade through 12th was our high school. Mm-hmm. And I had 9th grade civics, never taken civics in my life. And I had Mr. King, who was the first black teacher I'd ever had. And I'm not sure that had any effect on the particular question you asked, except that he's the guy who got me interested in learning. Hmm. And I still kind of remember the moment where he asked a question in class, and I knew the answer. And I was thinking, that's pretty neat to know the answer to the question. Before then, I'd been one of the kids in the neighborhood. And I really think that, I eventually became very enamored with this construct called scholarship. And I think Mr. King started me down that road. So I went to a good school. It was a small school. It doesn't exist anymore. They've now got a county school, which I think is good and bad. But when I went, I had the largest graduating class in the history of the school, Harper's Ferry High School. We had 42 students. I always kidded my sister that she never finished quite. She was valedictorian, but she never quite finished in the top the top 10% of her class, because there were only 9 students in her class, so she was in the top 11% of her class. So I think that small school training, you know all the teachers. It has its disadvantages, but it has its advantages. You knew everybody, and the teachers knew you, and when you played football, you played both ways. I mean, you used to finish football games exhausted. because we didn't have an offensive team and a defensive team. We didn't have enough people to do both. So the high school training was kind of good training, but not great. In terms of the classes, this was the late 60s, so everybody, myself included, was interested in science. I wanted to go in engineering, and there were some teachers there that really struggled to try to teach the classes I needed to master to go into an engineering program. Mm-hmm. Where do you want me to go all the way through the PhD, or
no, not yet. We'll get into the PhD in
so
a
that's
few
just
minutes.
So then my parents had been very good to me. I think they gave me a great upbringing. They'd done I thought some wonderful things as parents. My father was a tough role model to follow, not because he tried to be or he was nasty. He just was a very accomplished man. He started out literally with a high school education in 1933, left the farm in Maryland, height of the Depression, hitchhiked across the Potomac River, got a job at a plant in West Virginia, worked there as a common laborer, and was self-taught himself engineering and design. And when he had spare time, he hung around the smith shop. So he became a very accomplished blacksmith. Learned how to. I've got some examples of things that my dad made around here from industrial steel that I think are quite innovative, or not innovative, but quite a bit of craftsman to him. Let's put it that way. That he had kind of self-learned to be a blacksmith by befriending the chief smithy in the for the plant. Ended up being plant engineer. Went from no training at all in 8 years to plant engineer. By the time World War II broke out, he was plant manager, and worked at a plant that made material that was critical to the building of ships. Mm-hmm. We'll kind of leave it at that. So he enlisted 4 different times, and he was already in his 40s, so they didn't really want guys that age. My father, I had an older father. My father was already 40 when I was. It was past 40 when I was born, obviously. So my dad was at an age, we'll take you if we need you. And he kept, and you run a plant that's called a vital to the nation's defense job. So he always said, if they won't let me in the service, then if this job's so important, we're going to do it well. And he worked 10 hours a day, 7 days a week for what we today would call 24/7, but 7 days a week for the entire war to produce these war materials. Mm-hmm. Finished, decided he didn't want to work for a company. He was an executive now with what it was Martin Marietta, because they bought the plant where he worked. And he and my mother just said, let's take our savings and walk away. And started their own company. And make a long story short, by the time I was ready to head off to college, my dad was getting close to retiring and owned 4 successful companies.
The Supply Chain Doctor interviews thought leaders and visionaries who have had an impact on the field of supply chain management, shares professional development concepts for practitioners, and investigates current and future trends in the industry. Interested in sponsoring this show to help you get your message out? Send a note to chris@thescdr.com. We can also help with world-class supply chain education and workshops for you and your team. Thanks for listening.